The distress signal came from the darkest corner of known space, where decent beings feared to venture. Captain Sarah Chen stared at the transmission data scrolling across her screen aboard the exploration vessel Defiance, her coffee growing cold as she processed what she was seeing. "Ma'am, you need to see this," Lieutenant Torres called from the communication station. His voice carried an edge that made every crew member on the bridge turn their attention toward him. "The signal. It's coming from Kepler 442b. A collective intake of breath filled the bridge. Everyone knew about Kepler 442b. It was the Galactic Council's most notorious prison planet, a world where they sent the absolute worst criminals from across the galaxy. Murderers, war criminals, genocidal maniacs, and beings so dangerous that even execution seemed too merciful. The planet was surrounded by an impenetrable energy barrier, making escape impossible and rescue unthinkable. "That's impossible," muttered Chief Engineer Rodriguez from his station. "Nothing gets in or out of that place. The Council made sure of that when they established it 300 years ago." Sarah leaned forward in her captain's chair, studying the data more carefully. The signal was weak, fragmented, but unmistakably a distress call. More disturbing was the automated translation showing it was being broadcast in 17 different languages, suggesting multiple species were somehow working together to send it. "Computer, analyze the signal strength and broadcast pattern," Sarah commanded. The ship's artificial intelligence responded in its calm, measured tone. "Analysis complete, Captain. The signal appears to be coming from within the planetary barrier. Energy readings suggest the prison's containment systems are experiencing critical failures. Atmospheric processors are offline, and life support systems are operating at 12% capacity." Dr. Elizabeth Hawkins, the ship's xenobiologist, stepped forward from her observation post. "Captain, if those readings are accurate, every living being on that planet will be dead within 72 hours. The atmosphere will become toxic, and the temperature will drop below survivable levels for most known species." Sarah felt the weight of the moment settling on her shoulders. The Defiance was a human exploration vessel, part of Earth's growing fleet of ships dedicated to mapping uncharted regions and making first contact with new civilizations. They were scientists, explorers, and diplomats, not soldiers or prison guards. "Ma'am," Torres spoke up again, "I'm receiving additional transmissions. It looks like they're specifically requesting human assistance." "What?" Sarah stood abruptly, moving to the communication station. "Show me." The main screen flickered to life, displaying a rough translation of the incoming messages. Among the desperate pleas for help, certain phrases stood out. "Humans known for mercy. Earth species shows compassion to enemies. And most surprisingly, only humans have history of helping those who do not deserve it. Commander James Park." Sarah's first officer approached with a grim expression. "Captain, I've been reviewing our databases on human-alien conflicts. It seems our reputation for treating prisoners of war humanely has spread further than we realized. Some of these beings have apparently heard stories about how we've handled captured enemies in past conflicts." Sarah rubbed her temples, feeling a headache building. The irony wasn't lost on her. Humanity had only joined the galactic community 50 years ago, and already their unusual approach to warfare and justice had become legendary. While most species believed in absolute punishment or elimination of threats, humans had this strange tendency to show mercy even to their worst enemies. "Captain," Dr. Hawkins interjected, "I should point out that the beings imprisoned on Kepler 442b include some of the most dangerous entities in galactic history. The Zethric hive mind that consumed 12 worlds, the Void cult that attempted to collapse entire star systems, the Crimson Fleet pirates who enslaved entire civilizations. We're talking about creatures responsible for billions of deaths. And now they're asking for help," Sarah said quietly, still staring at the distress signal data. "From us." Lieutenant Commander Maria Santos, the ship's tactical officer, checked her console before speaking. "Captain, I'm showing no other vessels in this sector. The nearest Galactic Council ships are at least 2 weeks away. If we don't respond, there won't be anyone left to rescue by the time help arrives." Sarah turned to address her senior staff, all of whom had gathered on the bridge as word of the situation spread. "I want opinions." "All of you," Commander Park spoke first. "From a purely military standpoint, allowing these prisoners to die solves a lot of problems for the galaxy. Some of them have followings that might attempt rescue missions if they knew their leaders were still alive. Dr. Hawkins nodded reluctantly. James has a point. The scientific community would probably thank us for letting nature take its course. Some of these beings represent existential threats to entire species. But Chief Rodriguez shook his head. With respect, that's not who we are. I didn't sign up to be an executioner, even by inaction. These might be monsters, but they're asking for help. Santos surprised everyone by agreeing with Rodriguez. My tactical analysis suggests that showing mercy here, even to our enemies, could have significant diplomatic benefits. The galaxy is watching how humans behave when faced with moral complexity. Young Ensign Kelly O'Brien, barely 6 months out of the academy, spoke up hesitantly. Captain, my grandmother always said that how you treat your enemies says more about you than how you treat your friends. Maybe that's what makes humans different? Sarah closed her eyes for a moment, thinking about her own grandmother's stories about World War II, about Allied soldiers sharing rations with captured German troops, about field medics treating wounded enemies alongside their own soldiers. It was this uniquely human concept of mercy that had both fascinated and horrified their alien allies when they first joined the galactic community. Torres, open a channel to Earth Command, Sarah finally said. I need to speak with Admiral Chen. Ma'am, at this distance, there'll be a significant delay in communication, Torres warned. I know, but this decision is bigger than just our ship. If we're going to set a precedent for how humanity responds to situations like this, Earth needs to be involved. As Torres worked to establish the connection, Sarah looked out at the stars beyond the view screen. Somewhere out there, on a dead world surrounded by an impenetrable barrier, the galaxy's most dangerous criminals were slowly dying, and they had called for help from the one species that might actually answer. The communication link crackled to life, and Admiral Chen's weathered face appeared on the screen, the image slightly distorted by the vast distance. Sarah, I'm reading your situation report. This is unprecedented. Yes, sir. We're the only ship in range, and we have maybe 60 hours before it becomes a recovery mission instead of a rescue. Admiral Chen was quiet for a long moment. The Council is going to be furious if we interfere with their prison planet. And they'll be equally furious if we let thousands of beings die when we could have helped, Sarah replied. Indeed. Sarah, I'm giving you full discretionary authority on this mission. Whatever you decide, Earth will stand behind it. But understand that the galaxy will judge humanity by whatever choice you make. The transmission ended, leaving Sarah alone with the most important decision of her career. Sarah stood before the main view screen, watching the ominous shape of Kepler 442b grow larger as the Defiance approached. The planet looked like a massive sphere of dark metal and crackling energy, its surface hidden beneath layers of containment fields and defensive systems. The Galactic Council had spared no expense in making this prison absolutely escape-proof. Captain, we're receiving multiple transmissions from the planet's surface, Torres reported, his voice tense. The prisoners have somehow managed to organize themselves. They're transmitting from 17 different locations across the planet. Dr. Hawkins looked up from her analysis station, surprise evident in her voice. That's remarkable. These beings have been imprisoned for decades, some for centuries. Yet they're coordinating rescue efforts across species lines. The psychological implications are staggering. Commander Park joined Sarah at the view screen studying the tactical data. The prison's automated defense systems are still functional, but they're not targeting us. It seems the distress situation has triggered some kind of humanitarian protocol. Or maybe, Chief Rodriguez suggested from his engineering station, the Council programmed the defenses to allow rescue ships through. Even they wouldn't want thousands of beings to die from system failures. Sarah nodded, but her attention was focused on the incoming transmissions. The Universal Translator was working overtime, processing desperate messages in languages from across the galaxy. Some were formal requests for assistance, others were raw pleas for survival, but all carried the same underlying message: help us and we will remember. Ma'am, I'm picking up something interesting, Santos called from the tactical station. The prisoners aren't just asking for evacuation. They're requesting medical supplies, engineering equipment, and temporary atmospheric processors. They want to repair their own prison. This revelation sent a ripple of discussion through the bridge crew. Dr. Hawkins frowned as she processed the implications. They want to fix the prison? Why would they want to remain imprisoned? Young Ensign O'Brien, who had been quietly monitoring communications, spoke up. Captain, I think I understand. I've been analyzing the transmission patterns. And it seems like the prisoners have formed some kind of society down there. They're not just surviving. They're living. They've built communities, established relationships, maybe even families. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. The Galactic Council had designed Kepler 442b as a place of pure punishment. But over the centuries, the prisoners had apparently created something resembling civilization. They weren't asking to escape. They were asking to continue existing in the only home they had known for decades. Torres, can you establish two-way communication with the surface? Sarah asked. Working on it, Captain. The prison's communication systems are heavily damaged, but I think I can boost our signal enough to get through. The main screen flickered and filled with static before resolving into a grainy image. The figure that appeared was unlike anything Sarah had ever seen. It stood nearly 3 meters tall with crystalline skin that reflected the dim emergency lighting around it. What shocked her most, however, was that this being, clearly one of the feared Zathrak species, was cradling what appeared to be a small, furry creature against its chest. Human vessel, the Zathrak spoke in heavily accented Standard Galactic. I am designated Keeper of the Small Ones. I speak for the Council of Prisoners. We thank you for coming. Sarah stepped forward, her diplomatic training taking over despite the surreal situation. This is Captain Sarah Chen of the Earth vessel Defiance. We received your distress signal. What is your situation? The Zathrak's crystalline features shifted in what might have been relief. Our life support systems are failing. The atmospheric processors were damaged in a solar storm 3 days ago. We have perhaps 50 hours before the air becomes toxic. Our engineering teams are working to repair the damage, but we lack the necessary components. How many beings are we talking about? Commander Park asked, stepping into the transmission range. 17,432, came the immediate reply. We have maintained precise records. Among us are representatives of 43 different species, including some that the galaxy believes to be extinct. Dr. Hawkins gasped audibly. Extinct species. How is that possible? The Zathrak's expression grew somber. The Galactic Council's justice system has evolved over the centuries. Some of us were imprisoned for crimes we committed, but others— The being paused, looking down at the small creature in its arms. Others were imprisoned because our entire species were deemed too dangerous to exist. We are the last of our kinds. This revelation hit the bridge crew like a physical blow. Sarah had assumed they were dealing with individual criminals, but the reality was far more complex. Some of these prisoners were the final survivors of species that had been judged and condemned by the Galactic Council. You mentioned engineering teams, Chief Rodriguez interjected. Who's leading the repair efforts? The transmission flickered as another figure moved into view. This one was humanoid, but covered in what appeared to be organic machinery. When it spoke, its voice was a harsh mechanical rasp. I am Forge Master Caney, formerly of the Crimson Fleet. I have been organizing repair efforts for the past 7 years. We have learned to work together because the alternative is death. Sarah exchanged glances with her senior staff. The notorious Crimson Fleet had terrorized trade routes for decades before being finally defeated by a coalition of galactic navies. Yet here was one of their leaders, apparently working to save the lives of beings from species they had once enslaved. Forge Master, Sarah said carefully. Our records indicate that the Crimson Fleet was responsible for numerous atrocities. Why should we trust you? Caney's mechanical features shifted into what might have been a smile. Captain Chen, I do not ask for trust. I ask for atmospheric processors and fusion batteries. Whether you trust me or not, 17,000 beings will die if we cannot complete repairs within 50 hours. Keeper of the Small Ones spoke again, its voice softer now. Captain, we understand your hesitation. We are criminals, monsters, enemies of civilized society, but we are also the only family many of us have ever known. The small one I hold was born here 23 years ago. This is the only world she has ever seen. Sarah realized she was looking at something unprecedented in galactic history, a society of beings who had been cast out by civilization, but had somehow created their own version of it. They had found ways to coexist, to care for each other, even to love. Captain, Dr. Hawkins whispered, this changes everything. We're not just dealing with prisoners. We're dealing with an entire civilization that exists outside the normal social order. Santos checked her tactical readings. Ma'am, I'm detecting other ships approaching. Long-range sensors show at least 12 vessels heading this way. Some of them are flying Galactic Council flags. Sarah felt her stomach drop. The council was coming, and they would not be pleased to find humans interfering with their prison planet. But the decision had already been made in her heart. Keeper of the Small Ones, Forge Master Caney, we're going to help you, but we need to understand exactly what you need and how quickly we can provide it. The relief on both alien faces was unmistakable. Caney's mechanical voice actually cracked with emotion. We need 3 portable atmospheric processors, 12 fusion batteries, and approximately 4 tons of biocompatible metal for structural repairs. Our teams can handle the installation if you can provide the materials. Chief Rodriguez was already running calculations. Captain, we have everything they need in our emergency supplies. It'll mean stripping our own backup systems, but it's doable. Make it happen, Sarah ordered. Torres, prepare for an emergency supply drop. Santos, I want a full defensive analysis of those approaching ships. If the council wants to stop us, they'll have to go through us first. As her crew sprang into action, Sarah looked back at the transmission from the planet's surface. The small creature in the Zathrak's arms had opened its eyes, revealing startling intelligence and what looked remarkably like hope. Captain Chen, Keeper of the Small Ones, said softly, "Why are humans willing to help us when no one else would?" Sarah thought about her grandmother's stories, about the long history of human mercy toward enemies. Because sometimes, she said finally, being human means helping others even when they don't deserve it. Especially when they don't deserve it. The first supply drop went flawlessly. Chief Rodriguez had managed to reconfigure 3 of their emergency atmospheric processors for deployment, and the Defiance's transport shuttles were already en route to the planet's surface. Sarah watched, the tactical display with growing tension as the approaching Galactic Council ships drew closer. "Captain, I'm receiving a priority transmission from the lead council vessel," Torres announced. "It's the Judgment's Edge, flagship of the Council Enforcement Division." Sarah straightened in her command chair. The Council Enforcement Division only deployed their flagship for the most serious infractions of galactic law. "Put them through." The main screen shifted to show a stern-faced Altarian commander, his scaled features set in an expression of barely controlled fury. High Commander Vexitar had a reputation for absolute adherence to council law, and his presence here meant that humanity was about to face serious consequences. "Captain Chen," Vexitar's voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to instant obedience. "You are in violation of Council Regulation 347 Alpha. Unauthorized interference with a council correctional facility carries penalties up to and including species-wide sanctions. Cease your operations immediately and withdraw to a safe distance." Sarah stood, feeling the weight of her decision settling around her like armor. "High Commander Vexitar, we are responding to a legitimate distress signal from beings whose lives are in immediate danger. The Defiance is operating under humanitarian protocols recognized by the Galactic Charter. The beings in question are the most dangerous criminals in galactic history." Vexitar snarled, his scaled hide shifting to a darker green that indicated extreme agitation. "They were sentenced to permanent imprisonment for crimes against entire civilizations. Your humanitarian mission threatens galactic security." Dr. Hawkins moved closer to Sarah's position, her voice steady but urgent. "Captain, I'm reading massive life sign fluctuations from the planet's surface. The atmospheric contamination is accelerating. They have maybe 30 hours left, not 50. Commander Park leaned in close. "Ma'am, the council ships are powering up weapon systems. They're not bluffing." Sarah kept her eyes locked on Vexitar's image. "High Commander, are you prepared to watch 17,000 beings die to preserve a legal technicality?" "I am prepared to preserve galactic security," Vexitar replied coldly. "These beings chose their fate when they committed their crimes. The Council will not be swayed by human sentimentality." The transmission cut off abruptly, leaving the bridge in tense silence. Sarah could feel her crew looking to her for guidance, but her attention was drawn to another incoming signal from the planet's surface. "Captain," Torres said quietly, "Keeper of the Small Ones is requesting immediate communication." The screen shifted to show the Zathrak again, but this time the background revealed more of their underground facility. Sarah could see dozens of different species working together, some operating primitive machinery while others tended to what appeared to be injured or sick individuals. The small creature was still cradled in the Keeper's arms, but now Sarah could see it was not alone. Several other young beings of various species were visible in the background. Captain Chen, the Keeper's voice was urgent. We have successfully installed the first atmospheric processor, and our air quality is already improving, but our sensors indicate Council ships approaching. Are you in danger because of your assistance to us? Sarah felt her chest tighten. Here were beings that the galaxy had written off as irredeemable monsters, yet their first concern was for the safety of their rescuers. We'll handle the Council, Keeper. How many more processors do you need? Forge Master Caney appeared in the transmission, his mechanical features showing signs of recent repair work. 2 more processors will stabilize our atmosphere indefinitely. But Captain, we have prepared something for you. He stepped aside to reveal an incredible sight. Behind him, representatives of dozens of species stood together in what appeared to be a formal delegation. Some Sarah recognized from her xenobiology studies, species that had been written off as extinct or impossibly aggressive. Others were completely unknown to her. A tall, ethereal being with skin that seemed to shift between states of matter stepped forward. When it spoke, its voice carried harmonics that suggested multiple vocal cords. Captain Chen, I am Echo of Ancient Songs, last surviving member of the Melodic Collective. My people were imprisoned because our songs could influence the emotions of other species. The Council deemed us too dangerous to exist freely. Another being, this one resembling a living shadow with glowing eyes, moved into view. I am Whisper Through Darkness, once known as the Shadow Plague that consumed 7 systems. I have spent 143 years learning to control my hunger. These beings, it gestured to those around it, taught me that consumption and cooperation need not be mutually exclusive. Sarah realized she was witnessing something unprecedented. These weren't just prisoners who had learned to coexist. They were beings who had fundamentally changed through their interactions with each other. The isolation that was meant to punish them had instead created the first truly multi-species society in galactic history. Captain, Echo of Ancient Songs continued, we know that helping us may bring consequences upon your people. Therefore, we offer you something no other species possesses, our combined knowledge and experience. Whisper Through Darkness nodded, its shadowy form rippling. We have learned things about survival, about cooperation, about redemption that the galaxy has forgotten. We offer to share this knowledge with humanity, should you desire it. Forge Master Caney stepped forward again. More immediately, Captain, we possess detailed information about every criminal organization, every hidden threat, every forgotten danger that the Council has imprisoned over the past 3 centuries. This intelligence could help protect your people and others from threats they have never imagined. Sarah felt her mind racing. They were offering humanity something invaluable, not treasure or technology, but knowledge and insight gained through centuries of forced cooperation between the galaxy's most dangerous individuals. Santos, status on those Council ships, Sarah called without taking her eyes off the transmission. They've taken position around our ship, Captain. We're effectively surrounded, but they haven't targeted us directly yet. Dr. Hawkins moved too. Sarah sighed, her voice excited despite the circumstances. Captain, do you understand what we're looking at? This is the most diverse cooperative society in galactic history. These beings have created something that the Council, with all its laws and regulations, was never able to achieve. Young Ensign O'Brien spoke up from her communication station. Ma'am, I'm also receiving individual messages from the surface. Personal stories, messages of gratitude even. Poems. One being says his crime was destroying a planet, but he spent the last 60 years creating art that celebrates life. Sarah closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the magnitude of the situation. The Council saw criminals that needed to be contained. Humanity was seeing people who had found redemption through forced cooperation and shared struggle. Keeper of the small ones, Sarah said finally. We're going to complete the supply drop regardless of the consequences. But I need you to understand that this may create diplomatic problems between humanity and the Council. The Zathrak's crystalline features shifted in what Sarah was learning to recognize as their equivalent of a smile. Captain, we have been watching human transmissions for decades. Your species has a saying, Do the right thing, even when it's hard. We believe this is what makes humans unique. Echo of ancient songs added, the council governs through fear and punishment. They never learned what we discovered here. That beings can change, that enemies can become family, that redemption is possible even for those who have committed the worst crimes. The transmission began to flicker as energy fluctuations from the failing systems interfered with the signal. Captain, Forge Master Caney's voice crackled through the static. Whatever happens, know that you have given us hope. In 3 centuries of imprisonment, no one has ever chosen to help us. You have reminded us that mercy still exists in the galaxy. As the transmission cut out, Sarah turned to face her crew. Every one of them was watching her with a mixture of admiration and concern. She had led them into a situation that could result in humanity being ostracized from the galactic community. But none of them seemed to regret the decision. Captain, Commander Park said quietly, High Commander Vextar is requesting another communication. Sarah straightened her uniform and faced the main screen. Put him through. Vextar appeared again, but this time his expression was more calculating than furious.
Captain Chen, the Council has been monitoring your transmissions with the prisoners. We are intrigued by what we have observed. Sarah raised an eyebrow. Intrigued, High Commander? These beings appear to have developed a cooperative society.
That contradicts everything we believed about criminal psychology. The Council Science Division is requesting permission to study this phenomenon. The irony wasn't lost on Sarah. The Council was now interested in studying the very society they had accidentally created through their punishment system. And what about our rescue mission? Vexit. 3 weeks later, Sarah found herself standing in the most prestigious council chamber in the galaxy, facing a tribunal of beings that represented every major civilization in known space. The Galactic Council's Supreme Assembly had convened for the first time in over a century to address what they were calling the human question. The chamber itself was a marvel of engineering, with environmental controls that could accommodate the wildly different atmospheric needs of hundreds of species. Sarah wore a standard diplomatic environment suit, but she could see beings that existed as pure energy, others that required methane atmospheres, and some that seemed to phase in and out of visible reality. High Arbiter Zephyros, an ancient being whose species had helped found the Galactic Council millennia ago, spoke in a voice that resonated through multiple dimensions. Captain Sarah Chen of Earth, you stand before this assembly charged with violation of Council Regulation 347 Alpha, unauthorized interference with a correctional facility, and reckless endangerment of galactic security. How do you answer these charges? Sarah had spent weeks preparing for this moment, studying galactic law and consulting with Earth's best diplomatic minds, but standing here now, facing the combined authority of the galaxy's oldest civilizations, she felt the weight of her species' future resting on her words. Honored arbiters, she began, her voice steady despite her nervousness. I acknowledge that my actions violated council regulations. However, I submit that these actions were not only justified but necessary under the principles of universal, sapient rights that form the foundation of galactic civilization. A ripple of discussion moved through the assembly. The concept of universal rights was ancient, dating back to the original council charter, but it had rarely been invoked in such circumstances. Arbiter Crystalline of the Deep Void, a being that appeared to be made of living starlight, flickered with what might have been amusement. You claim universal rights for convicted criminals, being sentenced to permanent imprisonment for crimes against entire civilizations? I claim universal rights for all sapient beings, Sarah replied firmly. The crimes committed by the prisoners of Kepler 482b were heinous and deserving of punishment. But the right to life, the right to survival when facing extinction through no fault of their own, these are rights that transcend criminal status. High Commander Vextar, representing the Council Enforcement Division, rose from his position. Honored arbiters, the accused speaks of rights but ignores consequences. The security protocols surrounding Kepler 442b exist for the protection of all galactic civilizations. By interfering with these protocols, humanity has potentially compromised the safety of trillions of beings. Dr. Hawkins, who had been granted permission to accompany Sarah as a scientific advisor, stepped forward. "Honored arbiters, if I may present our findings from the rescue mission." Arbiter Zephyros gestured for her to continue. "Proceed, Dr. Hawkins." "Our analysis of the society that developed on Kepler 442b has revealed something unprecedented in galactic history. Over the course of 3 centuries, beings from 43 different species, many of whom were natural enemies, have created a functional cooperative civilization. They have eliminated internal violence, established sustainable resource management, and even developed new forms of art and literature." She activated a holographic display that filled the center of the chamber. The images showed the underground cities the prisoners had built, complete with carefully managed ecosystems, educational facilities, and what appeared to be recreational areas. "More remarkably," Dr. Hawkins continued, "they have achieved something that no galactic government has managed: true interspecies integration. Beings that were genetically programmed to view each other as prey or threats have learned to live not just in peace, but in genuine cooperation." Arbiters singing crystals of home, whose species communicated through harmonic resonance, produced a complex melody that the translation systems interpreted as skepticism. These observations are intriguing, but they do not address the fundamental question: can beings who have committed such crimes truly be redeemed? The chamber fell silent as a new figure materialized in the center of the room. The transportation beam was authorized at the highest levels. Someone was being brought directly from Kepler 442b to testify before the assembly. Keeper of the Small Ones appeared, still cradling the young creature Sarah had seen during their first communication. But now the Zathrak was accompanied by 2 other beings, Echo of Ancient Songs and, most surprisingly, a small humanoid child who couldn't have been more than 10 years old. "Honored arbiters," Keeper of the Small Ones spoke, their crystalline voice carrying across the chamber with surprising clarity. "I am here not to defend my crimes, they are indefensible, but to speak of transformation." The child, who appeared to be of a species Sarah didn't recognize, stepped forward with remarkable composure. "My name is Hope," she said in perfect standard galactic. "I was born on Kepler 442b 23 years ago. My parents were prisoners, but I am not. I am proof that even in a place designed for punishment, life finds a way to create something beautiful." A collective gasp moved through the assembly. Many of the arbiters had likely never considered that children might be born in the prison, or what their status would be under galactic law. Echo of Ancient Songs began to speak, but instead of words, a melody emerged that seemed to touch something deep in every being present. The translation system struggled for a moment before producing text. "This is the Song of Second Chances, composed over the past century by representatives of 17 different species. It tells the story of beings who were monsters learning to become protectors, of predators learning to nurture, of destroyers learning to create." The song continued for several minutes, and Sarah watched as even the most stern arbiters seemed affected by the haunting beauty of the music. When it ended, the chamber remained silent for a long moment. Arbiter Zephyros spoke first. "The testimony is compelling, but it does not address the security concerns raised by the Enforcement Division. High Commander Vextar, please present your analysis." Vextar activated his own holographic display, showing detailed security reports and threat assessments. "Honored arbiters, our intelligence indicates that several criminal organizations across the galaxy have interpreted humanity's rescue mission as a sign of weakness. There have been 17 attacks on Council facilities in the past 3 weeks, with the perpetrators claiming they expect human mercy if captured." Sarah felt her heart sink. The unintended consequences of their actions were exactly what she had feared. But Hope, the young woman from Kepler 442b, stepped forward again. "Honored arbiters," Hope said, her voice clear and confident. "The High Commander speaks of security threats, but he ignores the intelligence we have offered to share. The beings on Kepler 442b possess knowledge of every major criminal organization in the galaxy, accumulated over centuries of imprisonment. We know their methods, their leaders, their weaknesses." Forge Master Kaney's mechanical voice echoed through the chamber's communication system. "We offer the Council a choice. Continue to see us only as threats to be contained, or recognize us as reformed beings with unique insights into the criminal mind. We can help prevent more crimes than our own imprisonment ever could." Arbiter crystalline of the deep void flickered brightly. You propose to become consultants? Advisors to Council security forces? We propose to become citizens, Keeper of the Small Ones replied simply. Not free citizens. We understand that our crimes require ongoing supervision, but contributing citizens, beings who use our dark knowledge to protect others rather than to cause harm. Sarah realized that the prisoners had just proposed something revolutionary, a form of supervised citizenship that would allow them to contribute to society while still acknowledging their past crimes. It was a concept that challenged every assumption about criminal justice in the galaxy. Arbiter Zephyros turned his attention back to Sarah. Captain Chen, your rescue mission has precipitated a crisis that threatens the fundamental principles of galactic justice. Yet it has also revealed possibilities that we had never considered. The Assembly must now decide not only your fate, but the fate of 17,000 beings who exist outside our traditional concepts of justice and redemption. Sarah straightened, feeling the moment crystallizing around her. Honored arbiters, humanity offers to take responsibility for these beings. If the Council will allow it, we propose a supervised integration program. The prisoners would be relocated to a human-administered world where they could contribute to society while remaining under careful observation. The chamber erupted in discussion. Some arbiters seemed intrigued by the proposal, while others appeared horrified by the idea of releasing the galaxy's most dangerous criminals into human custody. High Commander Vextar stood again, his scaled features showing barely controlled anger. The humans proposed to take custody of beings that required an entire planet-sized prison to contain. This is madness! But Hope stepped forward one final time, her young voice cutting through the chaos. The High Commander speaks of madness, but I ask you, which is more mad? Keeping beings locked away forever with no hope of redemption, or giving them a chance to prove that even monsters can leasing? The debate raged for 6 hours. Sarah watched from her designated position as the greatest legal and philosophical minds in the galaxy wrestled with concepts that humanity had been grappling with for millennia. The question of redemption, of second chances, of whether any being could truly change. These were ideas that had shaped human civilization for thousands of years. Arbiter, eternal flame of justice, representing one of the galaxy's oldest civilizations, finally called for order. Her species had existed when most others were still primitive, and her words carried the weight of eons. The Assembly has heard compelling arguments from all sides. However, we require additional information before rendering judgment. She gestured to the holographic display, which shifted to show detailed files on several of the Kepler 442b prisoners. We have reviewed the crimes of these beings. The Zathric hive mind consumed 12 inhabited worlds. The Shadow Plague destroyed 7 star systems. The Crimson Fleet enslaved entire civilizations. These are not ordinary criminals, they are beings responsible for genocide on an unprecedented scale. Sarah felt her stomach clench as the full magnitude of what they were proposing hit her. These weren't petty criminals or even murderers. They were beings whose actions had resulted in the deaths of billions. Yet she thought of Hope, born in that prison and raised by these same beings who had never known violence or hatred. Echo of ancient songs spoke again, their harmonic voice carrying across the chamber. Honored arbiters, I do not ask you to forget our crimes. I ask you to consider what we have become. The Zathrak who stands before you was once part of a hive mind that knew only consumption. Now he protects the young of 17 different species. The shadow that once devoured light now teaches children to sing. The pirate who enslaved worlds now maintains the life support systems that keep us all alive. Dr. Hawkins stepped forward again, her scientific training evident in her measured approach. Honored arbiters, I have conducted extensive psychological evaluations of the prisoners during our rescue mission. What we found challenges everything we thought we knew about criminal psychology. She activated another display, showing complex psychological profiles and brain scans. These beings have undergone what can only be described as fundamental personality reconstruction. The isolation and forced cooperation required for survival on Kepler 442b has literally rewired their neural pathways. They are, in the most literal sense, no longer the same beings who committed their original crimes. Arbiter Silicon Dreams, a crystalline being whose species thought in pure mathematics, flickered with curiosity. Dr. Hawkins, are you suggesting that imprisonment has cured these beings of their criminal tendencies? I'm suggesting something more complex, Dr. Hawkins replied. The traditional model of punishment assumes that beings are static, that a criminal will always be a criminal. But what we've observed suggests that consciousness itself can be transformed through sustained interaction and shared purpose. High Commander Vextar rose from his position, his frustration evident. Honored arbiters, the scientific theories are fascinating, but they ignore practical reality. These beings possess knowledge and capabilities that make them existential threats. The shadow can manipulate darkness across vast distances. The Zathrak can influence other minds through pheromone manipulation. The former Crimson Fleet members know every weak point in galactic shipping routes. Exactly, said a new voice that made everyone in the chamber turn. Admiral Chen's image appeared on the communication screen, transmitted from Earth with the highest encryption protocols. High Commander Vextar has just explained why these beings are invaluable as allies, rather than prisoners. The Admiral's presence surprised Sarah. She hadn't expected Earth's military leadership to become directly involved in the tribunal. But as she watched her commanding officer address the most powerful beings in the galaxy, she understood that humanity was making a statement about their intentions. Honored arbiters, Admiral Chen continued, humanity formally requests custody of the Kepler 442b prisoners under a supervised integration protocol. We propose to establish a monitoring world where these beings can contribute their unique knowledge and abilities to galactic security while remaining under constant observation. Arbiter Zephyros leaned forward, his ancient features showing interest. Admiral Chen, you speak of using criminals as security consultants. How does Earth propose to ensure they do not simply resume their criminal activities? The same way they've been prevented from resuming criminal activities for the past 3 centuries, Admiral Chen replied. Through community oversight, shared responsibility, and the knowledge that any return to criminal behavior would endanger not just themselves, but the family they've built together. Hope stepped forward again, her young voice carrying surprising authority. Honored arbiters, may I tell you about my education? The assembly granted permission, and Hope began to speak about growing up on Kepler 442b. She described lessons taught by former galactic criminals who had become teachers, learning mathematics from beings who had once used those same skills to calculate orbital bombardment patterns, studying xenobiology from creatures who had once used that knowledge to create plagues. The being I call grandfather, Hope said, gesturing to Keeper of the Small Ones, was once part of a hive mind that consumed worlds. He taught me about the interconnectedness of all life. The shadow who sang for you earlier once devoured light itself. She taught me that creation and destruction are 2 sides of the same force, and that choosing creation requires constant conscious effort. Sarah watched the arbiters as they listened to Hope's testimony. These ancient beings, who had seen civilizations rise and fall across cosmic ages, were hearing something entirely new, the perspective of someone raised by redeemed monsters. Forge Master Kaney's mechanical voice crackled through the communication system again. Honored arbiters, we offer the Council something unprecedented. The complete transformation of galactic criminal justice. Instead of simply punishing criminals until they die, create systems that transform them into protectors. Use our knowledge of criminal methods to prevent future crimes. Turn your greatest enemies into your most valuable allies. Arbiter Singing Crystals of Home produced a complex harmonic pattern that the translators interpreted as deep consideration. The proposals are intriguing, but the risks are enormous. If even one of these beings reverts to criminal behavior, the consequences could be catastrophic. And if they don't, Echo of Ancient Songs replied, the benefits could transform galactic civilization. Imagine criminal organizations trying to operate when their every method is known and anticipated. Imagine a galaxy where even the worst beings can find redemption and purpose. Young Ensign O'Brien, who had been granted permission to attend as Sarah's aide, spoke up hesitantly. Honored arbiters, may I share something from human history? The request was unusual, but Arbiter Zephyros nodded. Proceed, Ensign. On Earth, we once had a practice called hanging judges, legal officials who believed that execution was the only appropriate punishment for serious crimes. But we also had another tradition, the possibility of parole, of redemption, of earning a second chance through demonstrated change. O'Brien's voice grew stronger as she continued. Our greatest leaders, our most celebrated heroes, often came from our most troubled backgrounds. We learned that sometimes the people who have fallen the furthest are the ones who can climb the highest, because they understand both darkness and light. The chamber fell silent as the implications of her words sank in. Humanity was proposing something that challenged the fundamental assumptions of galactic justice. That criminals could not only be reformed, but could become forces for positive change. Whisper through darkness manifested in the chamber, their shadowy form barely visible but somehow commanding attention. Honored arbiters, I consumed 7 star systems because I knew only hunger. These beings taught me that hunger could be satisfied through protection rather than destruction. I offer to teach others this lesson, to show them that even the darkest nature can be transformed. Arbiter Eternal Flame of Justice stood, her ancient form radiating authority. The Assembly has heard unprecedented testimony and proposals. We will now deliberate. Captain Chen, the prisoners, and all human representatives will be informed of our decision within 72 hours. As the formal session ended, and beings began to file out of the chamber, Hope approached Sarah. Captain Chen, whatever the Council decides, you have given us something precious, the knowledge that mercy still exists in the galaxy. Sarah knelt down to the young woman's level, seeing in her eyes a wisdom that seemed far beyond her years. Hope, you and your family have given humanity something precious too, proof that redemption is possible, even for those who seem beyond saving. As they prepared to leave the chamber, Sarah realized that regardless of the Council's decision, this moment had changed everything. The galaxy would never again be able to simply write off its criminals as irredeemable monsters. The question was whether galactic civilization was ready for such a radical transformation. The waiting was the hardest part. Sarah paced the diplomatic quarters aboard the Council space station, watching the news feeds as the galaxy reacted to news of the tribunal. The response was as divided as she had expected. Some species calling for humanity's expulsion from the galactic community, others expressing cautious support for the radical proposal. Dr. Hawkins looked up from her datapad, where she had been analyzing the psychological profiles they had compiled. Sarah, I've been thinking about something Hope said during the testimony. She mentioned that the prisoners taught her about the choice between creation and destruction. That's a remarkably sophisticated philosophical concept for beings who were supposedly irredeemable monsters. Commander Park joined them in the common area, carrying a steaming cup of coffee that smelled like home. I've been monitoring Council communications, and there's definitely division in their ranks. The older species seem more open to the idea of redemption, while some of the younger civilizations are calling it dangerous naivety. Sarah nodded, unsurprised by the generational divide. Younger species often saw the galaxy in more absolute terms: good versus evil, order versus chaos. It took time and experience to understand that reality was far more complex. Captain, Torres called from the communication station. We're receiving a priority transmission from Earth. It's marked for your eyes only. Sarah moved to the private communication booth, wondering what new development could have prompted such urgency. The screen flickered to life, revealing not Admiral Chen, but President Martinez herself. Captain Chen, the president began without preamble. I wanted to personally thank you for your actions at Kepler 442b. You've reminded the galaxy what humanity stands for, even at great personal risk. Sarah straightened, honored but nervous about speaking directly with Earth's leader. Thank you, Madam President. I hope the consequences won't be too severe for our diplomatic relations. President Martinez smiled, but it was a complex expression. Sarah, I have some news that will interest you. In the past 72 hours, we've received over 300 requests from species across the galaxy, asking about human conflict resolution methods. It seems your rescue mission has sparked a galaxy-wide interest in alternative approaches to criminal justice. This was unexpected. Sarah had been bracing for diplomatic isolation, not increased interest in human society. More importantly, the president continued, we've received formal communications from 17 different species requesting human mediation in ongoing conflicts. They specifically cited our willingness to show mercy to enemies as the reason for their requests. Sarah felt a strange mix of pride and bewilderment. Their decision to help the prisoners was somehow being seen as evidence of diplomatic skill, rather than dangerous weakness. Madam President, What does this mean for the Council's decision? It means, Captain, that humanity's reputation for mercy might just become our greatest diplomatic asset. Win or lose in the tribunal, you've changed how the galaxy sees us. The transmission ended, leaving Sarah with much to think about. She rejoined her crew in the common area, sharing the President's message and trying to process its implications. It makes sense, Dr. Hawkins mused. Throughout galactic history, most species have solved conflicts through dominance, submission, or annihilation. The concept of rehabilitation, of turning enemies into allies, is almost uniquely human. Young Ensign O'Brien looked up from her own datapad with excitement. Captain, I've been researching human history for parallels to our situation. Did you know that some of Earth's greatest peacemakers were former criminals? There are dozens of examples of people who committed serious crimes and later became advocates for justice and peace. Before Sarah could respond, Torres announced another incoming transmission. Ma'am, it's from Kepler 442b. Keeper of the Small Ones is requesting communication. The main screen activated, showing the familiar crystalline features of the Zathrak. But this time, the background revealed something Sarah had never seen before. Hundreds of beings from dozens of species working together on what appeared to be a massive construction project. Captain Chen, the Keeper began, we wanted you to see what we have been building while awaiting the Council's decision. The camera pulled back to reveal an enormous structure rising from the planet's surface. It appeared to be some kind of monument or memorial, but its design was unlike anything Sarah had ever seen. Flowing organic curves merged with geometric precision, creating something that seemed to celebrate both order and chaos. We call it the Monument to Second Chances, Forge Master Kaney's voice explained as his mechanical form came into view. Every being on this world contributed to its design and construction. It represents our commitment to transformation, to becoming something better than what we were. Echo of ancient songs appeared, their ethereal form shimmering with emotion. But more than that, it is our promise to the galaxy. If the Council grants us this chance, we pledge that every action we take will honor the mercy we have been shown. Hope stepped into view, now wearing what appeared to be formal robes made from materials Sarah didn't recognize. Captain Chen, I have been chosen to speak for the next generation born on this world. We are 37 beings, born to parents who were criminals but raised by a community that chose redemption. We pledge ourselves to serve as guarantees of our parents' transformation. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. These young beings, innocent of their parents' crimes but aware of the shadow they lived under, were offering themselves as living proof of the possibility of change. Whisper through darkness manifested in the transmission, their shadowy form somehow conveying deep emotion. Captain, we have learned that true justice is not about punishment but about healing. We wish to help heal the wounds our past actions created. The transmission was interrupted by an urgent alert from Torres. Captain, the Council Tribunal is reconvening. They're ready to announce their decision. Sarah looked at the image from Kepler 442b one last time, seeing the hope and determination in the faces of beings who had spent centuries learning to become better than their worst impulses. Keeper, whatever happens, you've already proven that redemption is possible. Thank you for teaching us that. As they prepared to return to the Council chamber, Sarah realized that the decision facing the Arbiters was about more than just the fate of 17,000 prisoners. It was about whether galactic civilization was ready to embrace the radical concept that anyone could change, that mercy could be a tool of justice rather than its opposite. The Council chamber was even more crowded than before. Representatives from hundreds of species had gathered to witness the historic decision. As Sarah took her position, she noticed that many of the observers seemed to be watching her as much as the Arbiters. Arbiter Zephyros rose from his position, his ancient voice carrying across the chamber with solemn authority. The Supreme Assembly has reached its decision regarding the prisoners of Kepler 442b and the actions of Captain Sarah Chen. The chamber fell completely silent. Sarah could hear her own heartbeat as she waited for words that would determine not just her fate, but the future of everyone on that distant prison world. After extensive deliberation, examining precedent, considering testimony, and weighing the potential consequences of our decision, the Assembly has concluded that the situation at Kepler 442b represents an unprecedented opportunity for galactic justice. Sarah felt her hands trembling as she waited for the actual verdict. Therefore, The Assembly hereby establishes the Kepler 442b integration protocol, under which the prisoners will be relocated to a supervised world administered jointly by the Galactic Council and the human government. This world will serve as a testing ground for revolutionary approaches to criminal rehabilitation. A roar of discussion erupted throughout the chamber. Some observers seemed pleased, others outraged, but Sarah barely heard any of it. They had won. Somehow, impossibly, they had convinced the galaxy's greatest legal minds to embrace the concept of redemption. Arbiter Zephyros continued, his voice cutting through the noise. Captain Chen, while your actions violated Council regulations, they have also revealed possibilities that we had never considered. You are hereby censured for unauthorized interference with a Council facility, but commended for your contribution to galactic jurisprudence. High Commander Vextar stood, his scaled features showing controlled frustration. The Assembly's decision is noted. However, the Enforcement Division requests the right to establish security protocols for this integration project. Granted, Arbiter Zephyros replied, but these protocols will be developed in consultation with human administrators and representatives of the prisoner community. As the formal session concluded, Sarah felt a weight she hadn't even realized she was carrying finally lift from her shoulders. They had done it. 17,000 beings who had been written off as irredeemable monsters would get a chance to prove that even the worst criminals could become forces for good. Hope appeared on the communication screen, tears streaming down her young face. Captain Chen, you have given us the most precious gift imaginable, a future. But Sarah knew that the real work was just beginning. They had convinced the galaxy to try something unprecedented, but now they had to prove that it could actually work. 2 years later, Sarah stood on the observation deck of the orbital station above New Redemption, watching the sunrise paint the planet's surface in shades of gold and amber. The world below bore little resemblance to the harsh prison planet the former inmates had left behind. Carefully planned cities dotted the landscape, surrounded by flourishing agricultural zones and connected by a network of transportation systems that had been designed by beings who understood both efficiency and beauty. Captain, the morning briefing is ready, Dr. Hawkins announced as she joined Sarah at the viewport. Her role had evolved from ship's xenobiologist to Director of Psychological Services for the Integration Project, and the work seemed to energize her in ways that deep space exploration never had. Sarah nodded but didn't immediately turn away from the view. Elizabeth, do you ever wonder if we made the right choice? Some days I look down there and see a miracle of cooperation. Other days I worry that we're one incident away from proving the skeptics right. Dr. Hawkins smiled, understanding the weight that Sarah carried as the project's overall director. Sarah, the transformation we've witnessed down there defies every conventional theory about criminal psychology. But more than that, it's teaching us things about sapient nature that we never understood before. They walked together to the briefing room, where the morning reports from New Redemption's various districts were displayed on holographic screens. The data was remarkable. Crime rates that were virtually non-existent, productivity levels that exceeded galactic averages, and satisfaction indices that rivaled the most prosperous worlds in Council space. Commander Park, now serving as the project's security coordinator, looked up from his reports with a satisfied expression. The overnight reports show another quiet night. The most serious incident was a disagreement over garden maintenance schedules in District 7. Sarah couldn't help but smile. District 7 was administered by Whisper Through Darkness, the former shadow plague who had once devoured entire star systems. The idea that such a being was now mediating gardening disputes struck her as both absurd and wonderful. What about the Council inspection team? Sarah asked. Are they still scheduled to arrive today? Torres, now the project's communications director, nodded. High Commander Vextar's team will be here this afternoon. They're conducting their quarterly review to ensure compliance with the integration protocols. The relationship with Vextar had evolved considerably over the past 2 years. Initially hostile to the entire project, the Altarian commander had gradually become one of its most effective advocates, as the results became impossible to ignore. His security protocols had proven essential not for containing dangerous criminals, but for protecting the reformed beings from extremist groups that still viewed them as threats. Any word from the Galactic Criminal Justice Reform Committee? Dr. Hawkins asked. Sarah's expression brightened. Actually, yes. 3 more species have formally requested assistance in establishing their own rehabilitation programs. The Centaurian Republic wants our help with their overcrowded prison systems, and the Andromedan Collective is interested in our conflict resolution protocols. The success of New Redemption had indeed sparked a galaxy-wide revolution in thinking about criminal justice. The traditional model of punishment and containment was being challenged by species that had witnessed the transformation of beings once considered irredeemably evil. A soft chime indicated an incoming priority transmission. The main screen activated to show Keeper of the Small Ones, their crystalline features now bearing what Sarah had learned to recognize as contentment. The young creature they had protected during the rescue was now grown, working as a teacher in one of New Redemption's schools. Director Chen, the Keeper said, using Sarah's new title, "We wanted to inform you that the Memorial Council has completed their latest project." The transmission showed a gathering of beings from across New Redemption, standing before what appeared to be a massive data archive. Representatives of every species that had been imprisoned on Kepler 442b were present, along with many of the younger generation born in the prison. Hope, now serving as New Redemption's elected representative to the Galactic Council, stepped into view. Director Chen, "We have completed the most comprehensive database of criminal methodologies, terrorist tactics, and security vulnerabilities ever assembled. This information represents 3 centuries of accumulated criminal knowledge, now freely shared with galactic law enforcement." Forge Master Caney appeared, his mechanical features showing modifications that allowed him to interface directly with the archive systems. "More than just information, Director. We have included detailed psychological profiles and rehabilitation recommendations for every type of criminal behavior represented in our community. We offer not just knowledge of how crimes are committed, but insights into how criminals can be reformed." Sarah felt a familiar surge of pride watching these beings who had chosen to transform their darkest knowledge into tools for protecting others. "Keeper, this is extraordinary. The Council's law enforcement agencies will find this invaluable." Echo of ancient songs materialized in the transmission, their harmonic voice carrying a note of solemnity. "Director Chen, we also wish to announce the completion of another project, the Victims' Memorial." The scene shifted to show a beautiful garden, where thousands of crystalline structures rose from carefully tended flower beds. Each crystal bore the names of beings who had been harmed by the crimes committed by New Redemption's residents. "We cannot undo the harm we caused," Echo continued, "but we can ensure it is never forgotten. Every being on this world spends time in this garden, maintaining it and remembering those we failed in our previous lives." Whisper Through Darkness manifested briefly in the transmission. "We have learned that true redemption requires not just changing how we act, but remembering why we must never return to what we were." Dr. Hawkins leaned forward, her scientific curiosity evident. "Hope, how are the integration studies progressing?" Hope smiled, her expression carrying the wisdom of someone who had grown up witnessing unprecedented transformation. "Dr. Hawkins, our data suggests that forced cooperation and shared responsibility create neural pathway changes that are essentially permanent. The beings here aren't just choosing to be good, they've been neurologically rewired by their experiences." This was perhaps the most significant discovery of the entire project. The extreme conditions on Kepler 442b, combined with the necessity of cooperation for survival, had literally changed how the prisoners' brains functioned. They had undergone a form of evolution that made violence and antisocial behavior neurologically difficult. "We've also made another discovery," Hope continued. "Several species represented here were thought to be extinct. Our genetic diversity preservation program has successfully maintained viable populations of 12 species that exist nowhere else in the galaxy." Sarah exchanged glances with Dr. Hawkins. This was yet another unexpected benefit of the project. New Redemption had become a repository of genetic diversity that might otherwise have been lost forever. The transmission was interrupted by another communication alert. Torres quickly switched to the new signal, which showed High Commander Vextar's ship approaching the orbital station. "Director Chen," Vextar's image appeared on screen. "I request immediate permission to address your staff and the residents of New Redemption." Sarah frowned, concerned by the urgency in the commander's voice. "Of course, High Commander. Is there a problem?" "On the contrary," Vextar replied, his scaled features showing something Sarah had never seen before: excitement. The Galactic Council has just approved the expansion of the integration protocol to 50 additional worlds. We need new Redemption's residents to serve as advisors and trainers for the largest criminal justice reform initiative in galactic history. The briefing room erupted in surprised discussion. Sarah felt her heart racing as she processed the implications. What had started as a desperate rescue mission had become a galactic revolution. As Vexitar's ship docked with the station, Sarah looked once more at the planet below. New Redemption gleamed in the morning sun, its cities bustling with beings who had found purpose in redemption. Children played in parks maintained by former genocidal maniacs who had learned to nurture instead of destroy. Artists created beauty inspired by their journey from darkness to light. Teachers shared knowledge hard-won through the experience of transformation. Hope's voice came through the communication system one final time. Director Chen, you once told us that sometimes being human means helping others even when they don't deserve it. We have learned that sometimes being redeemed means helping others avoid the mistakes that led us to imprisonment in the first place. Sarah smiled, thinking about her grandmother's stories of mercy shown to enemies, of second chances given to those who seemed beyond saving. Humanity's greatest strength had always been their ability to see potential for good even in the darkest places. As she prepared to meet with Vextar and begin planning the expansion of the integration protocol, Sarah realized that the galaxy was about to discover what humans had known for millennia, that redemption wasn't just possible, it was one of the most powerful forces in the universe. The former prisoners,